back, everyone. This is the Changelog. We're a member-supported blog podcast and weekly email covering what's fresh and what's new in open source. Check out the blog at thechangelog.com, our past shows at 5by5.tv/changelog. And you're listening to episode 126. Jerod and I talked to Craig Muth about Xiki, a cool new project that brings the power of shell commands to everyone. It's a pretty wild and deep conversation we had with Craig, so definitely hang on to your seats. Today's show is sponsored by DigitalOcean, CodeShip, and TopTal. We'll tell you a bit more about our friends at CodeShip and TopTal later on, but DigitalOcean is simple cloud hosting built for developers. In just 55 seconds, you can join over 150,000 developers who deploy daily to DigitalOcean's SSD cloud. Enjoy the ease of use and speed of an SSD-only cloud. Create droplets, manage your DNS, build a new server from a snapshot, save a ton of time installing Rails, Docker, GitLab, and more with one-click installs. You can even scale your infrastructure with their intuitive API. Sign up today and use the code ChangelogJuly or ChangelogAugust to get a $10 hosting credit when you sign up. Head to DigitalOcean.com to get started. And now, on to the show. We're joined today by Craig Muth. He is, I don't know, Craig, you're doing some crazy stuff. Some are saying changing the way shell works. You're here to talk about this very cool project you have started, I guess, 10 years ago, Xiki, which is super powerful for the shell and some pretty cool stuff. So we also have Jerod Santo on the call as well, doing some heavy lifting here, right, Jerod?
Yo, what's up?
How's it going, guys?
Yes, yeah, I'm here.
Heavy lifting. I don't know what that is, but that's how it goes. But Craig,
impressive.
Welcome to the show. Finally, you're a listener of the show, right?
Yes, big fan.
How many changelog shows have you listened to?
Oh man, probably about somewhere around 10. Just sort of like spread out all over the place.
You got a favorite, by any chance?
Let's see. I'm a big fan of Rethink DB, so that was a good one.
That was a good show.
Probably didn't know we were going to have a quiz section.
I'm a big fan of Avdi's and a huge fan of pair programming, so that was a pretty good one for me as well.
Yes, yeah. I think a lot of people have enjoyed that show as well. It was a good show. Cool.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess let's kick off with why we're on this call. You reached out to us a couple days ago because you got a Kickstarter ending. We'll fast forward to like the now present and kind of rewind and play back.
Cool.
But like right now, you're dealing with a pretty much what I can tell is a 10-year-old project that's just now kind of getting some real limelight. You've been using it for a very long time, but now you also have a Kickstarter going on to kind of help fund it to the next level. And this isn't the first time we've had an open source project on the show that's primarily not primarily, but started from a Kickstarter. And so that's where you're at right now. Why don't you give the listeners kind of an intro to who you are and kind of what Xiki is and what you're doing and maybe even why Kickstarter?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm a coder first and foremost. I've always kind of loved coding. I grew up in Ohio, kind of started out like most of us, just kind of hacking around and doing things, doing a bunch of coding that I really kind of got excited about. Went to school, got beaten down a little bit, and taught I had to do some structure. My first consulting job, I really bought into the like high structure OO stuff for everything, and kind of had phases back and forth. But I've always had a kind of a rebellious streak against high structure, high abstraction, and I've kind of that was my cat in the background. She says hi. So I've kind of always had this rebellious streak, and I feel like over the last 10 years, I've kind of watched people kind of also gain a rebellious streak. Like, for example, you used to not really be able to just have a hash that wasn't acceptable and like pass around the values of a form field. Now everyone does it. There used to be no such thing as JSON. You had to have objects and structure for everything. Now everyone will put something into JSON. Wikis are becoming a big thing. And I sort of, had all these ideas that I kind of suppressed and squashed and just used on my own. It's actually more like 13 or 14 years from the beginning, but it started out pretty rough and it didn't even have a name in the beginning. It's just a bunch of collections of eLisp stuff, basically, where I could expand stuff in the shell and expand file paths in the shell, navigate files, and then run shell commands like in a text buffer. And I just had a few like moments where I realized like, wow, you actually can do these very flexible things, but have them be in a pretty nice structure. Sort of like the first time I saw a wiki, it blew me away. I kind of thought, wow, you can actually have that, just these big text files where you put free form text in with headings, and then that's, just a flat namespace, where you've got like everything dumped in. You've got a project page next to a page of contacts next to everything else, and like, wow, that simple thing can like be a better solution than like a big massive file, shared directory of stuff for your company, or it can be better than SharePoint. So yeah, I've kind of like held on to this Xiki idea for a long time, and I've kind of come to believe it's kind of a pretty big missing piece in the landscape of tech. And I was working for banks and insurance companies in Ohio. Eventually, kind of realized I needed to get out, and I moved out to Silicon Valley, to San Francisco. Decided I was going to work on my startup, Memorize.com, which I did, and had interns and part-time employees, and kind of probably should be focusing on that now, but instead decided to take a big risk and work on this crazy open source thing full-time, Xiki. And the Kickstarter, I think now is the time to bring it to the world. If you look at my GitHub page, you'll see a lot of issues of people saying like, hey, really liked this, but had a hard time installing it. And that's sort of because I've been neglecting people. I've basically wanted to make it for myself. I use it for everything, for development and notes and everything. And I've kind of intentionally let the installer be crappy for a while, because I almost didn't want people to use it because I had all these features.
That's a good way to not let them use it, is just keep features suppressed.
Yeah, I'm super proud of that. But I wasn't really suppressing features. It was just I wasn't improving the installer, because I would spend time on it and it would just take a lot of time. But I had this like list of 3 really big things I wanted to do, and I just recently have kind of finished them up. So now I'm to the point where I'm like, all right, it's ready for the world. And Kickstarter seemed like a good way to reach out.
So you have a really solid video on the Kickstarter page, but for those listening, can you give kind of the elevator pitch for Xiki, what it does and how it's different than what we currently have? Sure.
There are a lot of ways of describing Xiki. The simplest way is it's like a command line, but it's a better way of running shell commands. It's not meant to replace the command line. It's meant to augment it. So for example, if you do an ls, instead of then having to do a cd to like, the 4th directory that you see on the screen, in Xiki, you can just move your cursor down to that 4th directory and then control enter to expand. So you can navigate directories like kind of like a GUI app. And then when you run shell commands, you can type a prompt on any line in basically a big text area by just typing a $, rather than being restricted to the the single prompt at the bottom, as is the case with traditional shell consoles. And then anytime you run a command, you can immediately type to incrementally filter down the output. And then with many commands, you can move your cursor down to the output of, like, say, git. If you type git and you move your cursor down to log and control enter, it'll expand that and run the git log command for you. And if you then move it down to a commit and expand that, it'll go one level deeper and show you, your commit message and all the files, and then you can drill in and interact with the output as though it was like a GUI tree.
So it's very freeform, just like a wiki.
Yeah, very freeform. You can edit anything.
So in practice, I suppose, how many users has it had? I know you have on your video a couple guys who said, I've been using it for 7 years. I'm sure that's not in the current form, but in this, in the one that you show in the video where it's free form and you can click here and you can drill down in trees and stuff, mm-hmm. How many people have been using that, or how long have you been using that in practice, and how does it feel as opposed to what we currently do?
The drilling into the file trees has been there since pretty much the day one. So that my two friends that have used it for years and years, they use the file tree. Drilling into the output of shell commands is relatively new, so there aren't many people that use it. And there are a few people here and there out on the net that have got it installed. It's hard for me to estimate. It's a relatively low number because the installers are kind of not great. As far as how it feels, I don't know, like some people, it's hard to say. I think it's an individual experience. Like some people just really, really get it. And they're like, whoa, I can see how these, 2 or 3 things would be an improvement. I can filter down, I can drill in, I can copy and paste a command and run it again and still have the old outputs. And I can delete the lines in the output that I want. Cause like you said, everything's freeform. You can edit everything. And some people just say like, well, wait a minute, why wouldn't I just use my shell? Mm-hmm. To me, it feels just sort of natural and like obvious improvements. For some cases, not all. It's not meant like as to replace the shell. There's some things the shell is like really great at, like asynchronous stuff.
It kind of feels like, not exactly like this, but it kind of feels like what is it like kind of an IRB session where you can kind of jump into. What's the other kind of really awesome IRB, Jerod, the one that's out recently? I don't use it. Proc. What is it called again?
Pry.
Pry. Pry. Yeah, Pry. That's what it is.
I actually did a pairing session with Conrad Irwin, one of the Pry guys. Pry is awesome.
Yeah, it seems a little bit like, obviously that's, Ruby, but this is kind of everything. It seems a little like what that provides, but on a grander scale for the entire shell. Yeah,
they're a little different. Like basically in Xiki, everything just happens from a text file. So when you run a command, the output is just inserted as text into your text file, and then you can save it. Pry is kind of more along the lines of like, a REPL, and has some other cool integration points. But when I got together with Conrad Irwin several months ago, we had some really cool ideas for kind of the two complementing each other, like making a Xiki interface, a Xiki command that could call the Pry features and sort of drill in and like CD ls into the functions and stuff. I want to get back to that at some point because I think that'd be really awesome.
I was going to say, I think interactions are really, it seems like from your Kickstarter, that's one of the main focuses of your development roadmap is to get it integrated into Vim, into Emacs, into Sublime Text, and so on. Right now, it's kind of in its own world, and it's not really integrated into the environment.
Well, right now it supports Aquamax and Emacs.
Okay.
Those two text editors. Aquamax is basically a very user-friendly version of Emacs where you can Command C, Command V. You can use the mouse to select text, and you can type to replace it. It's very much like a Mac native text editor. So that's the editor I recommend people to use. They can, if they don't like Emacs, they don't have to really know it's Emacs. They can use the menus and stuff, and they can use, Command S to save, et cetera. So it runs in that as sort of the default, and then it also runs in like base Emacs and terminal Emacs. And there's tentative Vim support, but it's very, very weak. There's a tentative Sublime support, but it needs to be improved, which is what the Kickstarter is, half of what the Kickstarter is about. And there's this brand new XSH where you can run it right in the shell console. It's not released yet. That I'm going to do first, and that'll let people just type XSH space, git on the command line, and they don't even have to worry about setting anything up. It'll just pop up, and I'll have stuff right there on the screen saying, hey, type Control Q to quit and type Control E to expand. So that's probably going to be the default, just XSH right from the
That could be pretty good for learning people too. Like, just getting started, you get all the feedback basically from the CLI that's already present for Git. And, do you want to do a push or do you want to do a pull? Those kinds of things are like already accessible, and it's also keyboard navigatable. So it's not like you have to move your mouse around, but though you could, right? You can double click on things if you wanted as well.
You're right.
So you said XSH. This piece of it, does it pop its own window when you do that? Because I know it's very interactive, clickable. Or can it take over your current terminal session, or does it pop its own UI?
It takes over the current terminal session. What's actually happening behind the scenes is it's launching Emacs.
Okay.
But I'm overriding all the keyboard shortcuts, including escape. I'll make escape actually cancel out so it won't confuse people. So as far as most people are concerned, they don't even have to know what it is. I'll have all the key shortcuts on the screen. They're all remapped. Not all of them. You can use the base Emacs shortcuts if you know them. But yeah, it's just actually running within Emacs and just customizing the heck out of it. And it's doing it in a way that's not interfering with your normal Emacs config if you have it, which is a big, challenge that I've had.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I was wondering how you were accomplishing that. What about operating system support? Is this Linux and Mac at the moment?
Yeah, Linux and Mac. There's pull requests for Windows support out there that might go a little bit of the way toward Windows support. I'd like to do Windows support. Now that I've got all this publicity from the Kickstarter, I think if it passes, I'll be able to reach out to people afterward and say like, hey, people that know how to do this process communication in Windows, like pair with me and help me on it. But I'm not promising Windows support as part of the Kickstarter, even though a lot of people want me to, just because I don't, I've already kind of promised a lot. But I do want to do it.
Well, Jerod, do you think it makes sense to dive down Kickstarter? Kind of go. I was thinking about going into the past a bit to try to figure out what was the problem you kind of tackled? Where did this come from? What's the history? It's like 10 years old, so it's not like it's a year old. It's pretty dated.
Yeah.
In terms of its age, not so much. Not good.
And I'm interested in, I guess, a little bit of the technical implementation. I'm sure for a 10-plus year project, it's probably gone through different forms. I know it seems to be written in Ruby at the moment, but perhaps not always. So I'm definitely interested in the history of how you developed it.
Cool. Yeah. Originally, it was in eLisp.
Right.
I originally just absolutely hated and despised Emacs because I started from like a Mac GUI, Actually, I started before that. That's not true. I did. My first experience was Apple IIe in BASIC when I was really young, and then I got a Mac and just loved it. Went to college and they're like, "Here, use Emacs," and I was like, where are the menu items? This is horrible. And I started using Pico instead, which is where I got the inspiration for seeing the keyboard shortcuts on the screen I was just talking about. But then I kind of fell in love with Emacs and loved what it did and just the free form aspects of it. But I always hated the default keyboard shortcuts and still kind of do. And I use it for all kinds of things. And it seemed like one big missing piece was cool file navigation. And I always want to be able to have kind of extreme flexibility. And the file navigation that was kind of ideal for me was being able to just edit anything at any time. So, if I have a directory of, say, 20 models and I only care about 2 of them, and one starts with a A and one starts with a Z, I don't want to scroll back and forth between the two. I want to delete the ones in between just temporarily, hide them from the view. So I made basically a file browsing, format, which is just, the most obvious thing you can do, which is like you basically type a path with slashes. And then if you want to make it multi-line, you can, indent 2 spaces. So, slash project slash, and then a line break space, and then my project. Basically taking that and making that navigable via keyboard shortcuts and then later the mouse. So it started out as eLisp. I made that. In eLisp, I made the running shell commands, which is pretty similar. It's just you type a $space and like ls, and then it inserts the result, indented 2 spaces underneath. Implemented the filtering down and tons of keyboard shortcuts and just kept changing things over and over and over. And eventually discovered, I became a Ruby programmer in the meantime and just loved Ruby, and DHH kind of just rocked everyone's world with Rails, and, had this just beautiful combination of sort of flexibility and yet structure where it was needed in Rails. And I just totally bought into it, became a Rails programmer, loved Ruby because I liked the OO stuff I could do in Java, but loved I started out with Perl. I loved the flexibility of Perl, and Ruby was like a perfect marriage of the two. So I found this library called EL4R, like eLisp for Ruby, written by one of the core Ruby guys, this guy named Rubikitch. And that let you program inside of Emacs, but using Ruby instead of eLisp. So I ported to that, and my I ported my big code base to that, named it Xiki around that time. My productivity shot up about like 2x or 3x. I do like Lisp, but for this particular application, Ruby was just a great fit. A lot of text processing, processing. And it's been Ruby for maybe 7 or no, more like 8 or 9 years now, I think.
So I know one of the major drawbacks that you mentioned for people getting started with it has been the setup/install process. Is some of that to blame on Ruby as a choice? I know recently we had on Jeremy Signs, who has a post where he was distributing command line tools in Ruby and switched to Go because of the the universal binary that you can just drop in. Mm-hmm. Is Ruby in the ecosystem some of the reason why the setup process has been not streamlined yet?
I suppose Ruby is probably. I mean, at this point, the Ruby landscape is pretty good because Ruby 2.0 is installed by default on the Mac. Mm-hmm. On Linux, you just tell them to install something and they say okay. Right. On the Mac, if you say install a different version of Ruby, it's a big challenge, but. With Mavericks, Ruby 2.0 is installed by default, and I can just use that. It has Emacs installed by default. I can just use that, nice. Behind the scenes. I should mention that beginning a couple years ago, I started supporting other languages. So even though Xiki is implemented in Ruby, you can make Xiki commands in Python, JavaScript, CoffeeScript, several different languages.
Nice. Talk about these commands.
Yeah, the coolest part of Xiki is that you can make your own commands. Xiki is very wiki inspired, which you're probably not surprised because it's called Xiki, which is right. Wiki with an X instead of a W. I was calling that expandable wiki is kind of what Xiki was short for. At first I called it executable wiki. Now I'm leaning toward expanding wiki actually for XIKI. So it's very wiki inspired. You can type the name of a command, and if it doesn't exist, it'll pop up and say, hey, this command doesn't exist. Do you want to create it using a text file or a Ruby script or a Python script or a directory structure where the directories and files are your menu items, or a class where it'll just take the methods in your class and use them as the menu items. And then when you type the name of that command, let's say Atom is a command, then you'll be able to just type Atom on any blank line and double click and it will run your file. And basically as time goes on, I've kind of had more and more ideas about, hey, here's this obvious way of making a command, and they kind of get simpler and simpler. And to me, I think for what Xiki does, it tries to make it so that all the simplest possible ways of making a little command with a UI of kind of menu items exists. So Xiki is one use case is better shell console. The other use case is quickest way to make a UI on top of code, like a working UI.
So you can just take the command that you've written, it's got its own little UI, and you can just pass it to a friend and they can run it?
Exactly.
Cool. Is there a distribution mechanism, or is it email me this text file or whatever?
Yeah, there's no central repository yet, aside from basically my Git repository. The homebrew model of if you have a new package, you just give it to the main guy and he'll check it in for you. I mean, that's what I've got now basically. But down the road, having something sort of like Ruby Gems or NPM is probably going to be a fit at some point.
So how many built-in commands are there just off the top of your head?
Several hundred. I'd say roughly 400 or something, probably more, but some of them are kind of silly and useless, but over a couple hundred pretty useful ones. I should say at the intro to the command discussion that the hello world for making a command is just make a text file, say named hello.txt, and you put world in the file, and then you just drag that into a special directory, and then that immediately is a command. And that by default, that directory is just the commands directory in your home directory or any other directory that you designate as being in your Xiki path.
And you said earlier Ruby, Python, several other languages. Just put those languages in there and they run?
Exactly. Just drop it in and then,
So where do you see the power of something like that coming into play? Like, give us some examples to expand on, we've got some people listening to the show and they're thinking, okay, well, how can I be practical? Maybe they've already got some ideas, but can you give us some things and some ways that you've used that specific feature set?
Yeah, sure. Since it's so easy to make commands, I've made a ton of them that like normally would have taken me like way longer. I've written Eclipse plugins, and that's like a really big process to plan out what your UI is going to look like. In Xiki, you don't even worry about the UI. You just dump out some text and it displays it to the user, and then you can like fix it later, make it look more organized later. A good example is just actually last night. My friend Jeremy and I got together and paired to make a Heroku menu. And we did it in like a half an hour. It's just this flat file with kind of like if else. And you type Heroku on the command line with Xiki shell, which is XSH. It's the new kind of easy way of interacting with Xiki. You can just type XSH space dash Heroku. And then it shows you Heroku. And then underneath that, it lists out all your apps. And you can move the cursor down and drill into each app. And then it has items for each app of things that you want to do, kind of like you would have in a GUI. So there's a config option underneath your Heroku app. You can expand that. It shows you the config parameters. And then you can edit and then save those back by Control E, the same way you expand and collapse. There's a log item. You can expand the log and type to filter down. There's a browse option. I actually just posted a video on the Kickstarter page, and I tweeted it to @Xiki on Twitter if you want to check it out.
Was that an update or something like that? Let's get Heroku back. All right, let's get Heroku to back Xiki.
Yes, my new strategy.
That's a nice way to get their support, right?
Yeah, I hope it works. That's my plan for getting the 50% of the Kickstarter goal met.
We'll put that link in the show notes then.
It's awesome. Yeah, a ton of people retweeted that this morning. It was awesome. People saying like, hey, Heroku, check this out. Maybe you should back Xiki. Yeah, I'm going to reach out to companies, probably a bunch of different ones, and tell them like, hey, there's this $10,000 reward that will get your logo on Xiki.org and XSH.org for a year, and the eternal gratitude of the thousands of developers that are excited about Xiki.
Let's pause the show for just a minute and give a shout out to our sponsor, CodeShip. CodeShip is a hosted continuous deployment service that just works. You can easily set up continuous integration for your application in just a few steps and automatically deploy all your code when your tests pass. CodeShip has great support for lots of languages, test frameworks, as well as notification services. They easily integrate with GitHub or Bitbucket and can deploy to cloud services like Heroku, AWS, Nodejitsu, Google App Engine, or even your own servers. Setup takes only 3 minutes. Get started today with their free plan and make sure you use the code, the Changelog Podcast. That's the Changelog Podcast as the code to get a 20% discount for 3 months on any plan you choose. Head to codeship.io and tell them the Changelog sent you. I noticed in the screenshot, at least, of the opening video that you were talking about, it's the Xiki shell command, so XSH. It looks like a space and then a dash Heroku.
Yes.
Is that what you meant? Is that what you said earlier, or did I miss that?
I think I said that.
Okay, because I thought you said... Because I know you can kind of pre-pen the Xiki shell in front of something like ls and something, and you can get that. So this is a little different. This is like a flag.
Yeah, if you pass a flag, XSH space dash foo, that's a Xiki command. If you do XSH space foo, it'll treat that as a shell command.
Oh, okay, gotcha. That's why I was trying to connect the dots out then.
Yeah, and they're kind of similar. You can make both of them have interaction. Like that's a new Xiki feature. If you type XSH space like who am I, and then enter, that'll open up who am I, and it'll run it. It'll show you the output indented 2 spaces underneath. And if you double click on if in a shell console, it would be Control E to expand the output. Then Xiki will pop up and say like, hey, it looks like you're trying to interact with the output of this command. There isn't a wrapper for it yet. Do you want to create one? And then it'll walk you through, giving you a little template of just making a script in any language you want. And then basically you make that output look at what was expanded, and usually you make it like call, shell out to the command and do something that's relevant. So you can make wrappers for commands. So you can interact with, the output of, you can just go in and expand the output of, another good example is like PS. If you want to kill processes, I've got a wrapper built in where you can type XSH space PS, and then you can go move your cursor down to one of the lines of the output, and then Control E to expand that, and it'll kill the process for you. So interacting with the output of commands, kind of like it's a GUI, like you've got stuff on the screen. Sometimes you don't want to like type another command underneath that, has retyping some of the output. Like it's right there. Why not just move your cursor down and say, hey, do the relevant thing to this line of output?
That's awesome. I've spent years. I probably have this ingrained in my fingers now. How to type, PS AUX, pipe it into grep for a specific word, and then grab the PID and kill the PID. And it's like a 2-step process that I've just done so many times. I'm sure there's ways even inside just Bash to make that more simple. But being able to interact like a GUI seems like it would really be beneficial to me in that specific circumstance.
This might be about the same time the listeners are saying things like, is this real life? My brain just exploded. My mind is blown. Holy Mother of God. My life just changed forever. These are quotes on your Kickstarter, but these are things that I'm sure people are saying, because that's when I saw that, I was like, that's insane, to be able to do that. And like you said, Jerod, it's kind of like ingrained in your brain to type certain commands and certain flags to things and grep for stuff when you don't really have to do that now. It's you just made the lives of so many so much easier.
Yeah, thanks. Well, let's not mention the Hacker News comments that are like, "You are an idiot. I hate you."
That's just life, right? That's what happens.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of talk about the, what is arguably a marketing campaign that you've had going, because you've gotten Xiki on TechCrunch, #1 on Hacker News, I think Linux Journal, IT World. These are major outlets, and it's a shell console, right? I mean, I'm not trying to belittle it, but at the end of the day, like TechCrunch doesn't usually cover these things. How did you get so much exposure for a project that you've had put so much time into, kind of behind the scenes, and now all of a sudden explosion?
It's hard to say. I think it's probably the videos. I put a ton of time into the videos and just implementing a bunch of features. Like I think the XSH thing recently kind of pushed me over the top. And I was in the middle of the Kickstarter. I had all my friends advising me like, hey, spend your time like, sending emails to people and reaching out to the media. And I was like, no, I'm just going to hunker down. I've got like, 20 days left, but I'm going to spend 5 days implementing this XSH thing, because I think I can make a video and people will just appreciate the seeing that in action. So just doing videos of showing a lot of cool stuff happening and getting rid of the pauses and getting to the point, making yourself get to the point really quickly. It's been really cool. The Linux.com article and the TechCrunch article were like almost more positive than I would have ever, dared to dream about. Like they, kind of said like, particularly Carla Schroeder, who's like just an amazing person. She wrote the O'Reilly's Linux cookbook and the Linux networking cookbook. She's like, kind of one of my idols now, actually. And having her say like Xiki is the next big thing in free and open source software, and it's revolutionary, and she doesn't use the word lightly. That's just blows my mind, and I'm so happy with that. I did like reach out to a few people, but I guess it kind of snowballed. On the downside of it, I've got like, the big outlets, like you said, TechCrunch in particular, and giving me amazing coverage, and I'm still just about at half of my goal. So it's sort of bittersweet. Like, where do I go from here, Yeah,
this is something that Tim Caswell covered, Jerod, not long ago when we talked to him. Similar. I mean, he'd done 2 rounds of, fundraising. First one was a Kickstarter. Second one was a bounty source. And, he was building JSKit at the time to dovetail into T-Edit. And his story was a bit more successful, and I think it was only because Mozilla stepped in and gave like $30,000 to kind of complete the goal or something like that. But we're seeing open source look for funding more often. And in your case, it's a little different, Craig, because you've got a startup you're doing. You took a pause from that to work on something that's open source, and then also kickstart it. So it's slightly different, but yeah, it's kind of a bummer that you're not getting, I guess, more funding traction on your Kickstarter. Yeah,
just for the record, my startup is not making any money, so I'm not asking for like a bonus here. Like, if this passes, I'll
so
be
how
able
do
to
you
spend
live then?
time on Xiki if off savings.
Okay, must be a lot of
money
then.
doing consulting,
especially if you're in Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, well, I've got roommates here, so we keep the rent down. But yeah, my new plan is to reach out to companies. I think it's actually a really big opportunity. Companies blow, just thousands on like sponsoring conferences. They don't blow it. It's it's good.
Right.
It's a good way to spend it. But they spend money on recruiting and advertising and thousands of thousands. And like Xiki's sort of like gotten all this publicity, and it's just sitting out there waiting for someone to kind of like a company to rescue it. And they would have tons of kind of like really cutting edge tech people that are like really into just the very cutting edge. Those are like the fans of Xiki. They would have those people saying like, "Wow, thank you, Engine Yard, or thank you Heroku or Mozilla for saving this." Unfortunately, I can't have the donation any bigger on Kickstarter than 10,000. So I'm going to need to like get maybe 3 or 4 companies to donate 10,000, which I think isn't much. And in return, I will make such a big deal out of tweeting and emailing all the Kickstarter backers saying like, "Hey, this company saved Xiki." I'll make screencasts showing. You
can even buy the .com. You could be like such and such company save Xiki.com and put up like a landing page
I will tweet that everywhere.
Yeah, right. That'd be crazy. Another thing, I mean, you've got your GitHub too. We had Chad on the show not long ago talking about GitHub, and
listen to that.
It's kind of a bummer. You got $1 per week coming to you. Listen, everybody, you got $1 a week. This guy's been building this open source project for 10 years. Okay, that's like a cent. It's not even cool.
Well, that's kind of what I get for having a crappy install. Like if all these people excited about it and they try to install it and like, 5 different errors. Like,
so maybe if you fix the install process, you get more GitHub?
Yeah, hopefully. It used to be higher. It used to be more than $1. But I actually found out that most of that was coming from my mom. Sad
nice.
True story.
Awesome.
So on the Kickstarter page, you talk about Xiki's future. I know we kind of covered a bit of it, but can you kind of paint the picture of like what's the trajectory? Yeah. Where are you going with it? And as best as you can, fill in the gaps for us.
Cool. Yeah. The future of Xiki's, it's morphing into a language. It's, basically just a kind of wiki-ish free-form way of like making a user interface. So, if you take a step back and look at what user interface is, let's say you have like a foo menu in your GUI menu bar and you click it and then you see bar. What's the difference between that and seeing a foo icon on your desktop? It pops up and it shows you bar. Typing foo in your shell command and it shows you bar as the outputs. You go to a URL, foo.com, and you see bar appear. There's something fundamental there that can be abstracted out. And to me, the simplest way of doing that, and a lot of other languages like Python and CoffeeScript are using this 2-space indenting. It's just this sort of natural thing. So why not have just dead simple kind of language/syntax of representing, a UI where you just type a word in freeform text and then you double click on it or to do a keyboard shortcut and then you see the output. And of course, from there, if that's indented 2 spaces underneath, you could have multiple lines of output, and each one of those lines of output themselves can be an option, and you can expand those and you indent that 2 spaces more underneath, so 4 spaces. And then at that point, basically, you've got like a tree that looks just like any, tree that you see in like a left nav of a standard application. But if you keep things simple and you keep things boiled down as a text format, you can kind of represent just about any user interface as just an indented textual tree. And I think it's just absolutely insane to me that there isn't a simple format where you can define an interface. It's like, make little animals, program, and underneath it you've got like mammals and lizards, and underneath mammals you've got dogs and cats. So you want to make that structure and deploy it as a navigable website, as a shell command, as a mobile app where it's a mobile app called Animals, and then you double click it and it shows you two options, mammals and lizards, or whatever I said. And then we've got all these devices coming out, like all these. I've got a Pebble, I love it. There are like 10 smartwatches coming out, and they all have their own separate APIs. And I think the world is just totally ripe for having this dead simple language where you can just type something out, basically the navigation of a program, and then deploy that to all these devices. Of course, if you want to make a Pebble app that does something useful, or an iPhone app, you'll probably at some point have to call like a native method. But I say make the structure first, make that deploy everywhere so you can navigate around. And then if you have to do something, whatever iPhone specific, then, on top of this universal structure of your navigation, you can, conditionally say like, all right, they clicked on phone call. If platform is iPhone, then make phone call. And, if you want to make it look pretty, then you can do all kinds of stuff that, we already have tools like this to like style the output to move things around and not make it just a nested structure. But out of the box with Xiki, you can just type, something like animals and then indent mammals and lizards underneath. And then you can navigate that and use it in the shell command. You can go to the Xiki web server that's built into Xiki, and you can see a mobile interface. So it'll show like a little mobile pill button style, the menu items. So mammals and lizards, and then you can click on mammals and it will move over slide over like a standard mobile interface. And from your text editor as well, if you have a Xiki plugin for your text editor, you can type animals and double click or control enter, and it will insert those underneath. And from there, you can do all kinds of things where it's not just this trivial example. You can add headings and paragraphs. Like I said, Xiki is very wiki inspired. There are wiki syntaxes for tons of stuff. Like I said, there's a wiki syntax for running a shell command. It's just $ space. And then the wiki syntax for heading is just angle bracket space. And then the heading syntax for a bullet point is just like a dash space, with 2 space indenting. So you can type those things in the command as well. And then when you display that in a mobile interface, it can show it can render the heading as a larger font size, and you can make actually an app that's like read only, that actually has some like useful content. You can make that with just 0 code, and that could deploy to everywhere. Like a cool example I think is like if you go to a conference, they could say like, hey, got the conference schedule in this global format. You can deploy it on your watch, you can deploy it on your cell phone, on and basically any device. And then even though it's like static content, it's very useful. And you could navigate around on your Pebble to see the schedule. And then, of course, from there, having embedded code is going to pop up as a need very quickly if you want to do something, more than a static app. So the way I do that is underneath a menu item, you can there's a wiki syntax for code embedded underneath a menu item, which is this exclamation mark space. And you can have multiple lines of a method, and that can call your library that has your code very well structured out in an OO way. You can have your menu item just delegate to that. And I've got a bunch of other ways of having dynamic code. Like you can have a class that has a kind of a routing string that'll route back and forth between methods, and different paths and pass arguments in kind of a sophisticated way. But kind of the number one rule in Xiki is like, by default, the absolute simplest way of doing something should work. Like if you can do something with a class, you should be able to do it with a script as well when you want to. If you can do that, you should just be able to take a text file and make that be, sort of a command or a program.
My mind is blown. I'm just thinking like you got language in there, you've got a shell, a shell augmentation, it's meant to be, kind of go in tandem with your show already. I mean, it seems, personally to me, it just seems like it's such a audacious kind of goal to hit. And the things you're talking about, I wasn't even expecting to go there. What about you, Jerod?
No, not really. I'm wondering now. I mean, 80,000 on this Kickstarter. What is that, like a 6-month runway, year runway? Maybe. You're in San Francisco, so 3 weeks. What is that?
Okay. I mean, I can make it stretch out for. I can make it stretch out for a year. But if it does pass, that's going to be, kind of a milestone where it means people kind of care. And what I'll spend my time doing. I mentioned early on. When I was talking about how much I like Avdi, I mentioned I'm a big pair programming fan. And if it passes, I'm just going to reach out and pair with everyone on Xiki. I've done that. I've done the Avdi's pair with me tag,
right?
Mm-hmm. And I've it's been a while because I've been like heads down coding by myself, which I kind of actually don't like to do. But I've made myself do it to get like all these features into Xiki. Before that, I was reaching out and pairing with tons of people. Like I paired with a lady in London, this really awesome dude I connected with in Argentina, and then people, half of it have been remote and half have been people in San Francisco. I've met at coffee shops and done like maybe 25 pairing sessions with people, and they've all just been fantastic. Like even people that weren't super techie, like they just had so many ideas of stuff I didn't think of, and we sat down and like made a command, and a half an hour that just whatever shelled out to that scraped some website and listed like the World Cup results, or done something more sophisticated. So that's what I want to do with my time. And I think if I have this year of time to just like reach out and pair with everyone, that will be the beginning of something else. Like that'll build up a team of people kind of taking it and running with it and making their own commands.
Right.
And
well, one thing we talked about recently with Chad Whitaker was talk to your users, because when he came on the show, it seemed like he had this gap between what he thought GitHub was and I think what the users were using it for. Where you're playing with, pairing, that's speaking to your users, right? I mean, if you want to see the success of Xiki, you're going to have to get in the trenches and speak with people and talk to people and get feedback in real time and manage the community. I can't say that your job over the next year is going to be easy. So for those of you out there listening to the show, hopefully it's Tuesday of next week, which you don't even know what today is, but doesn't matter. You got a few days left to back this thing on Kickstarter.
5 days left.
Yeah, I mean, give or take 5 days to back this project and show your support for this. If this is something that's of use to you, let's see this thing get done. But yeah, I can't imagine that you've got the next year of your life that's going to be fun, but not easy.
Yeah, I mean, pairing for me makes it easy, actually. Like, if I can pair with people, like I know I'm not going to slack. Like, obviously, you can't slack off. You don't even want to slack off if you're pairing with someone. So I'm actually looking forward to it. I think I actually just got done with the painful part. The last like 6 months of making myself sit by myself. Now I'm like looking forward to kind of getting out there and having fun again, actually. But yeah, if anyone thinks it's cool, check out the video. Go to xsh.org. And you can see kind of like a better way of running shell commands for many use cases, not all, right there in the top. And especially people that work for cool companies that back open source projects and sponsor conferences. I think Xiki is like a really kind of cheap way of getting a lot of publicity. I think if I can get a few companies to back it, can do some amazing things. And looking forward to just reaching out and pairing with people again and having a great time doing this stuff, getting people's ideas.
You have to be one of his first pairs, Jerod.
Yeah, totally.
I'm ready.
You guys should both pair with me. I promise it'll be fun. Everyone's had a great time doing it.
Sign me up.
Sign you up. How do you get on the list?
Wicked. Well, with you guys, you're on the list now. Anyone else, just tweet me at Xiki, Xiki on Twitter. And just say like, hey, I want to pair, and we'll pick a time and do it. I'm not looking for like commitment. We usually we'll just pick like an hour, and if it goes well, if we both like it, go for 2 hours, and then no commitment after that. I'm not looking for people to like try to rope into contributing to the project on an ongoing basis. I'm just like, I honestly think just reaching out and pairing with people. I mean, this is like Avdi's idea and other people's. I'm late to the game in it, but I think, just connecting to, like, you're a dev, maybe you're a junior dev, maybe you've been out there for a while. You're like sitting around, you're like, okay, time for my next project, or time to have some like fun and learn some new stuff. What better way than just to go tweet, pair with me, or just reach out and spend an hour with someone who like knows a project, and just have this amazing high energy pairing session where you're just learning stuff and firing off questions. Like, to me, that's such a win-win for most people. There's some people that just do really well coding by themselves. And those people are super valuable. But probably about half the population is very motivated by kind of being social. And for those people, I think this is going to be one of the biggest ways that people just find new projects, find new jobs, find team members. They're just gonna be like, hey, work with me on this. And they'll work with, 3 people in 4 or 5 hours. And then the people that hit it off, they'll work a little more, and they'll be like, hey, we had a great time working on, this little open source thing I was working on. Why don't you consult with me on my project? And then why don't you, work for my company, or why don't I work for your company? Like, I think the future of software dev is going to be just so open and embracive, and like, so social that I just get excited when I think about it.
Let's pause the show for just a minute and give a shout out to our sponsor, TopTal. Now, we've been working with TopTal for about a year now, almost a year now, and we thought it would make sense to circle back and talk to some of our listeners who have applied to TopTal and have been accepted, because only about 2 to 3% of the engineers who apply make it past their strict elite engineering process. And Daniel Lauzon, a longtime listener and fan of the changelog, is now living the dream. He's an elite engineer at TopTal. And I say living the dream because he's now able to have 100% control of the types of projects and technologies he's working on, as well as the rate he wants to charge. Daniel earns 100% of his income as a TopTal engineer, and he wanted me to pass on his seal of approval of the TopTal experience. For those of you out there who are freelancing or would like to test out freelancing, you've got to check out TopTal. If you think you have what it takes, head to toptal.com/developers. That's TOPTAL.com/developers to get started. Tell them the changelog sent you. Speaking of speaking and even being social, do you have any upcoming, since you've done the conference track of talking at RubyConf, Strange Loop, and others, do you have any upcoming conferences you'll be at to speak about Xiki, in addition to like your next year of coding and pairing?
I've kind of laid off on the conferences because they take a lot of time. Yeah. I'm glad I did those conferences, because like all the time I spent on the presentations helped me with my like way of explaining Xiki to people, and I use a lot of those thoughts in my Kickstarter stuff. I'm going to be on Ruby Rogues. Excited about that.
Nice.
In I think a couple weeks here. But if the Kickstarter passes, I'll probably try to do the conference thing again and just really reach out there and start spreading the word. I'll get XSH out there like soon, because it's all of a sudden like really kind of practical now. And I'll get a one-line installer so you can hopefully like apt-get install XSH, and then right away you can type XSH space -HTML, and then you can just type some HTML, modify the sample it gives you, and then control enter, and then bam, it shows in the browser, and then you can type XSH space -CSS to try out some CSS. You can do Bootstrap, and then just in a couple keystrokes, have a Bootstrap layout that you can just type. I've got like a wiki syntax, and you can drill into some examples. You can get a working Bootstrap layout. Node Rails, you'll be able to type XSH space -node, and then just expand out controller, and then modify the controller, and bam, you've got like you're trying out things in Node controller. I think the XSH stuff I think will demo particularly well at conferences. So I'll definitely want to do some of those again. Like, I've gotten really good feedback at conferences, but people have said like, hey, seems really cool. I don't know how it would fit into my workflow. Like, I'm not going to switch to a new text editor. In my text editor now, I kind of like it how it is. So people haven't, my cat doesn't like it. The cat's a Vim user and won't talk to me. Now that I've got XSH out there, that answer to that objection is easy. It's like, oh, here's how you incorporate it. Next time, instead of doing PS and then kill, you just do a XSH space PS. Or next time you're doing a git and you forget a command, you just do a XSH space git, and then you can drill into the output. You can also see code. This is a couple kind of cool features. These are a couple kind of cool features I haven't mentioned yet. Slow down. I'm starting to stutter, getting too excited. There are a couple of cool features with shell commands where you can look at the history of a command and narrow down and rerun it. You can also mark, commands with particular options as favorites. And then you can type XSH space -f git, for example, and it will show you your favorites. And then you can pick one and run it again.
Nice.
And you can also, there's documentation kind of that comes along with it, where you'll see like the examples for common ways of using the git command. Like, you can drill into examples. I think XSH space -e space git, that'll show the examples. Is probably how it'll end up being. And then you can drill into like undo, just move your cursor down and expand undo. And it'll say like, undoing the changes to one file. And it'll show you that it's that's the git checkout command. And you can just actually run it right from there. And then, undoing your repository, git reset, and then undoing it and wiping out other changes, git reset --head. So now you can actually kind of drill in to those examples and then run them right from where you're looking at the documentation.
That sounds really powerful for beginners who are trying to learn a specific tool. Also for even power users who I've been using the git command for years, but there's things in there that I have never come across, and you can kind of it amps up the discoverability.
Yeah.
When you're navigating a tree structure, than if you're trying to Google around for how do I do this in Git.
Yeah, totally. And to all you command line people that say the command line works great, I totally agree. I love the command line. I'm not looking to replace man, et cetera. Like basically I'm building on top and adding a few new features that work in some use cases. I'm not saying they're better across the board, but sometimes, having more options is kind of awesome. I'm really looking forward to getting people to contribute to these. Like, I've added a few of my favorite Git examples on my own, but once I get this out there and get people using it and adding their own, menu items underneath the Git examples, I think it's going to turn into something really awesome.
I think one feature too that you may not have really touched on that I think is kind of like a little hidden gem is like you can even browse databases. You got support from MySQL, RethinkDB because you're a fan of it, CouchDB, and all the other awesome DBs out there, but being able to even, dive into a database and browse around like that's even kind of neat as well. And I'm assuming just because of what you've said already that you can even run commands and interact with the output and save back to the database. Yeah,
that'll now be XSH tables that will list out your database tables, and you can type to narrow down or move your cursor down and expand a table, and it will show you the records. And then you can type to filter those down, and then you can just edit in line. And then Control E to save that back to the database. Yeah, that's something that in my presentations, I always get a good gasp from the audience at that point.
I was going to say, I was like, that's where I fell over. I almost fell out of my seat when I read that part of the
DOM editing. Also, people really like when I show expanding out the DOM and then updating the DOM and having it reflect in the browser right away.
Yeah, that's intense right there. Jerod, is there anything else you want to cover before we go into our traditional super awesome questions?
No, just to say, for anybody out there who wants to see this in action, looks like Xiki.org/screencasts has a bunch of stuff up there. Of course, the Kickstarter page also has a handful of things.
Yeah, the /screencast is a little out of date. I need to update that. XSH.org has a really cool, it's the newest screencast at the top. And then that has a link to the Kickstarter, which has the newest videos.
Cool.
Well, even so, I mean, even if they're a little data, you can go there and get excited about where it's been, and you can only imagine where it's going. So
yeah.
Don't feel like you can't go and watch them because Jerod, you were probably impressed, right?
Yeah, I was watching Can Your Shell Console Do This, which that first one, about a 3-minute video where you kind of build like, what if it could do this? What if it could do this? And then
yes, I like that one as well. Yeah.
Reveal, it can. That was very.
Were
nice.
you guys super annoyed by my repeating the what if you could?
No, not exactly. I mean,
I got so hammered for that.
I didn't think so. I mean, I felt like you were trying to make a point. When you make a point, you repeat yourself.
I've deleted like 10 YouTube comments that were just, what if you could, what if you could, what if you could, what if you could?
What if you could not place a comment here and go away?
No, I deserve it. I mean, I hammer other people's projects too. So it's,
haters.
What happens when you throw yourself out?
So 80 grand,
It's
you're
fun to
looking
be a
for
hater.
80 grand on this Kickstarter.
Yes.
Could be as much as 5 days left when you're listening to this. You're about halfway right now at the date of recording. And today's date is Friday, July 11th. Just so everybody's aware, the show should be out July 15th. So if you're listening to it July 15th or after, you've literally got days, possibly even seconds, to go and back this thing. So you want to do a quick rundown maybe of a couple of your favorite, not all of them, but a couple of your favorite rewards. Is that what they're called? Yeah, rewards in Kickstarter. Like some of your favorites. Maybe just kind of glaze over some of the cool ones that stand out.
Yeah. For $35, you can get a Xiki t-shirt. It's a American Apparel 50/50, really nice t-shirt. I went back and forth with the design like 5 times to get it right. It's a really nice digital print with a gradient on it. And then you can do, I think for, what do I have it for? 300, I think. You can do a pairing session with me. Let me bring up the page so I can tell you the actual number. I've got a couple different ones with pairing session. That's one of my favorites because I love to pair with people. You can pair with me on a menu for your project. And I'll include it in the Xiki distribution. I think that's currently the early bird ones are sold on that, I think. So now it's 300. Which I think is a good way to fund an open source project. If you're transparent about including people's stuff and it doesn't get in your way and users can override it, that's kind of one of my plans. Like after the Kickstarter, I'll say for a company that's got like a commercial project and they want their command included, just for cool. For a few hundred, I'll just stick it there by default.
Yeah.
It won't get in anyone's way if they don't want to use it. It's not going to pop up at them and say like, hey, this needs to be used. It'll just be if they type that. If you type Heroku or whatever, it'll be there for you to use. And the commands are they're so tiny. There's a few K or a few, not even a K, a lot of times of text that they don't bloat anything. There's a reward there where you can pair with me and I'll make a video of the little command that we make for your tool, your project, and then I'll publicize that. My absolute favorite one is the $10,000 category. which
Why is that?
Because it's $10,000.
And right now there are 0. Okay, so
right now there's 0.
And we want at least 1, maybe 2, maybe 5.
5 would make the Xiki Kickstarter pass. So that would be amazing.
There you go.
I think with 3 we could still get it to pass. So with that, I'll put your logo on xsh.org and Xiki.org. We can make it kind of big if you want, because like it's totally worth that. And I'll spread the word everywhere that your company rescued Xiki, and I'll tweet, I'll send emails to my, 1,300 backers. I've got a couple thousand Twitter followers. I'll tweet it a lot. Because honestly, it's in my interest to spread that out right now as much as I can, because that will encourage other companies to back it as well.
Tweet it a lot. I'll tweet it a lot.
Tweet it a lot.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer by any means, but I'm thinking maybe the audience might be thinking, what will Craig do if it doesn't succeed? If this Kickstarter fails and doesn't fully fund?
Yeah. Thanks, Debbie Downer.
Womp, womp, womp.
Just kidding. No, I'll just kind of regroup at that point. I'm going to keep working on it regardless.
You have a plan B then?
I kind of thought about maybe doing a smaller campaign for just XSH, but God, the thought of like redoing all this again and trying to be like a cheerleader again and saying like, hey, everyone, remember me? Well, now I've got this big thing again I'm harassing you about. Like, I'll probably take a break if I do it. Maybe a smaller one for just XSH. But I'll keep working on it for myself regardless, because I've used it for myself. I can't stop working on it. Like I've got all these things that I see as like obvious next steps, like using the tree structure as actually a data structure. It's sort of like a combination of a hash and an array. and like all kinds of stuff that I want to make a little generator where you can just take these two space indenting structures and generate a Pebble app. And that's easy to do, I think, and like generate the code for Pebble app, generate the code for iPhone. So I'll keep doing it for myself. I just won't jump in and do Sublime support and Vim support right away, because I'll have to probably actually get back to another project to make money other ways, basically. So
this is literally saving Xiki.
For the time being.
I mean, it'll still live on, but the trajectory, the feature set, the direction, the future that you painted out during this show, all of that, just in case no one's listening, all of that is not exactly riding on this, but it's certainly going to lift it up.
It will give Xiki a very strong chance of playing a big role in the immediate future of tech and bringing this, what I think is just something that the world absolutely needs, a dead simple structure for, defining a working UI, and, we can spread that to the world. It's open. You can incorporate that into your projects. It's very open. Like, I feel like if we want something like super, super open, that's going to like take all these devices that are out there now that have these user interfaces and make an open language and structure. I feel like we as developers have to do it ourselves. Like, companies have vested interests in making their own proprietary languages. Like, if we want another like HTML, which has revolutionized the web, and like before that it was like AOL that controlled every, the America Online, which was great. And, they couldn't like make a standard themselves. They just had to make something that worked for them. But, it was so far from being open, and the HTML basically just made everything possible. Like, mobile wouldn't be mobile without HTML. It just revolutionized everything and made everyone, able to be a web developer, and just made everything spread. And we need HTML for like a general purpose UI. Like, we need that, and it's got to be like as simple as possible. Like, trends right now are moving that direction anyway. If you look at like new languages like CoffeeScript, etc., they're like moving the direction of just like, you do like here's my class, and then underneath that I've got like, A colon, and underneath that I've got B colon. So it's happening now. Like the world is moving that direction. Let's make it open and as flexible as possible, and take control of it ourselves.
Cool. Well, let's what's the call to arms, I guess, besides back it, which which pretty much punched that in the face. What is the call to arms for the community? How can people step in? How can people help out? Besides, I guess you can say backing if you want, but that's I think it's pretty obvious.
How about reach out to companies and get them to back it? Like, I actually had late last night, I tweeted this Twilio thing saying, hey, everyone help me get Twilio to back this. After this, I'm going to make another video for probably Mozilla and a couple other companies. And the first ones that do it are going to get like the most press. So if you work for a cool company that donates to open source and sponsors, cool conferences, like, seriously walk to the office and say like, hey, check this out. You will get a bunch of press if you support it.
Okay. Everybody, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell your boss, tell your leaders to support this if they can.
You are my best friend right now.
and let's talk about Programming Hero. Like, we've talked a bit about your history a bit, but so do you have any Programming Heroes you want to plug here on the show today? Yeah.
Ward Cunningham is my programming hero.
Only one?
I would say DHH also with Rails, but Ward Cunningham is definitely at the top. He's the guy that wrote the original wiki. I remember working for a bank on a pretty cool team, but if you work for a bank, it's about money. It's not about programming. It's about not crashing the prod server and losing $1 million, in a half an hour. So I was kind of like disgruntled by all the structure that everyone had to go through. And this guy joined our team, and he installed a wiki. And I remember looking at this, seeing a wiki for the first time and thinking like, holy crap, that's, you can do that. Like, this breaks every rule that I've learned in school and with like structure. Like, you just make, I think every programmer should make a wiki, like new programmers. This is an exercise. You just like make one database table with a column of like name and then a column of contents. and then you give people this big text area where you can just type in any text, and then you like search and replace these little like syntaxes like equals into, you know, headings, HTML headings. And with this, like, you know, 2 fields and searching and replacing, and then of course you make links too. You make a structure for links. You've got this incredible, you know, versatile system that, you know, turned into Wikipedia basically, and, you know, defeated Encarta and all these like highly structured GUI tools. So that just was like a awakening for me. Like I felt like before that point, I almost had the idea of doing something kind of like a wiki, but never even dared to think about it or suggest it, because I knew I'd be laughed at. Like, oh, here's this guy's design for the system. He's going to have a big text field and dump everything into it and search and replace. Like, you know, let's not hire this guy. But Ward Cunningham is a hero because he does stuff like that. And he also has like these huge like design pattern chops. Like the first wiki was for augmenting the Portland pattern repository, which is like a bunch of strongly typed design patterns. So he's this guy that can use this, you know, high abstraction and complexity where it fits and does a good job, and where he sees an opportunity just to like do this really flexible thing. He'll just do it. I've sort of tried to adopt that.
It seems like he's like on the patterns and extreme patterns and extreme pair programming, or extreme programming. I want to put pair programming in there because you said it a couple of times today.
Well, he was like one of the guys. Right? He was one of the guys that invented pair programming, which I also like am obsessed with. So,
right. That's we'll link him in the show notes as well. Ward, thank you for your awesome service to the software development community.
Check out his projects. He's working on some really, really awesome stuff. I've actually had the opportunity to Skype with him for quite a while, and he's brainstormed with me on Xiki. Smallest federated wiki is what he's kind of designing. It's his project. It's sort of the next version of a wiki where it's federated out and you can have your own and share. It's kind of mind-blowing. Check it out.
Wow. Well, Craig, I want to say thanks, man, for coming on the show today. It's certainly been great to kind of get to know you and what you're doing with Xiki and the future of it. All I can say is, we hope that when people listen to this, they get excited about it and they go and back your Kickstarter and they help save Xiki from a different future. And thanks for coming on the show. Let's everyone say goodbye.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys. I had a great time.